and see if it pops up.
Hello? Oh, shit.
Oh, okay, crazy. Sorry. No. There, okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting, which is the Administration and Budget Committee meeting, special meeting on May 7th to order. May we please have roll?
Director Chapman. Here. Director Sutherland.
Here.
Director Dominguez. Here.
Thank you. I believe we have a quorum.
We do.
Thank you. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for March 23rd. Oh, I'm sorry. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the committee on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment?
There are none.
Thank you. And with that, I'd ask to move to the approval of the minutes.
I move approval of the minutes. I second.
Can we please do a vote? Any discussion or comments?
There are none. Director Chapman.
Yes.
Director Sutherland.
Yes,
Director Dominguez.
thank you. That's unanimously approved. The next item on the agenda is it's to review the proposed budget for fiscal year 26-27, and I believe we have a presentation from Justina.
Thank you. It's low enough for me today. Good evening, directors. I'm Justina Teen, Fiscal Services Officer, and we are pleased to provide the Administration and Budget Committee with a draft of the proposed budget for fiscal year 26-27. Here with me tonight is Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager, Elizabeth Loretto, Administrative Operations Manager, and Megan Drager, Conservation and Strategic Partnerships Manager. And I'm actually going to hand it off to Lee to kick us off.
Thank you, Justina. As Justina said, we have a wonderful team here tonight to present a draft budget for your review, to answer any questions you have, and offer any additional information that you might need. So before we jump in, I want to make sure that you know there's a printout at your chairs. There's the printout of the slides. In case you want to follow along. I think Caroline hasn't gave them. Did you set up the printouts, the slides I gave you?
I'm sorry, I put them all at the.
Thank you. In a moment, you will have printouts of the slides. For a handy reference note taking, if that's helpful to you. We're happy to take your questions as we go tonight. We'll be switching off speakers. Megan, Elizabeth, and I are going to stay seated so we don't do any really embarrassing mic changes up in the front, but we'll all be participating this evening. And then I just want to point out, we're lucky enough not to have a board meeting scheduled right at 6:30. So although we don't want to keep you late, there is a little leeway if we want to run a little bit longer than the 55 minutes we typically get for this presentation. So with that, we're just going to dive right in. So why do we do a budget? Well, a budget's a plan for allocating scarce resources to deliver services and/or programs. And a budget fulfills 3 major purposes. So all local public bodies, including special districts, are required to prepare and submit an annual budget to the state's Department of Finance and Administration or its equivalent agency. And you'll find in the authorities enabling act that your board is required to adopt an annual budget following the public hearing required under section 35136, and that'll be on June 11. The board is also required to implement a post audit of the financial transactions and records of the authority to be made at least annually by a certified public accountant. So you'll authorize an audit, financial audit afterwards as well. It also sets an approved framework for how the district will receive and spend income during the year. Very important for us all to know. And then adopting the budget in an open public meeting and making it available for review demonstrates transparency and helps build public trust. So all very important functions. And so how did staff go about creating the fiscal year 26-27 budget? The budget process actually started with the board retreat back in September 2025, with staff listening closely to the board's priorities, questions, concerns, and insights. Staff discussed in several forums how the agency could best deliver on the board's input and considered both their day-to-day programmatic work and their longer-term project work to fulfill these requests. So in parallel, a citizen-led funding initiative was created and has since been placed on the June 2026 ballot. But obviously, since the election has not happened yet and we do not know the results, we took a very conservative approach to building this fiscal year 26-27 budget. And we will stay tuned for after June. But we kept the budget for typical operating expenses paid for with authority funds flat compared to the current year, which is fiscal year 25-26. And Justina's going to walk you through this in a couple of minutes. You'll see that we continue to effectively leverage our OSA dollars with outside funding, grants from partners, foundations, state and federal resources. Megan will speak to what that funding is projected to look like in the new fiscal year and where those funds are coming from. Elizabeth's going to walk you through our staffing related expenses such as salaries, benefits, cost of living adjustment. And Justina, who always does the lion's share as the heaviest lift. We are incredibly grateful to you, Justina, for doing that. Is going to walk you through a budget summary, the funds that comprise our revenue sources, our carryover balances. So think of those like our savings account, our projected expenses for the upcoming year, and also a short overview of the financial mechanics of the Urban Grant Program. Lastly, I'll wrap up the presentation with a brief look ahead and next steps. And I think with that, we're ready to dive in unless there are any questions before Justina takes it away. All right. No, not yet. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, thank you, Lee, for grounding us with this overview. So as the committee has heard, with the initiative's outcome unknown, we're going to continue to take a conservative approach to our proposed budget. So for fiscal year 26-27, the proposed budget for the normal, usual course of activities that we deliver, across our projects, our programs, using our own funds is approximately $17.59 million, which is actually about 45,000 less than what we proposed last year and it was approved. So kind of like the second column is the approved current fiscal year's budget and what we're proposing in the third column. And so those are our own funds. We are continuing to leverage outside funding for acquisitions, capital projects. And in 26-27, we anticipate spending approximately $1.9 million to meet those project deliverables. Please note that this amount only reflects what we anticipate to spend and not exactly the entire grant amount. So the grant award amount. And it also does not include any unsecured grants, which might be grants that we applied for and may be eligible for, but we haven't quite yet entered into an agreement. And also as well as secured grants for acquisitions. So these are grants that we're in contract with, but there are acquisitions which the money goes straight through into an escrow account, doesn't pass through our books, doesn't show up across our bank accounts, for example. And Megan Drager would talk more about the outside funding, the breakdown of what was included in these numbers in about 2 slides later in our presentation. So we've anticipate increasing the spending for outside funding. And then we have director elections this coming fiscal year. We have it every even year, and we budgeted approximately $1.2 million for that. This expense recurs every even year, and for 26-27, we expect to receive the invoice from the Registrar of Voters for the election costs as well for the measure, the Citizens Initiative measure. The estimate provided to us was from November 2025. And that was about 3 million. These are non-discretionary in a sense that we have to pay it, but they're not really tied to like the actual like field work off, land management work that we do. And not tied directly to projects that we execute. Later on as we go through the budget, I'll provide a little bit more summary. We do anticipate a increase in the ROV, the Registrar of Voters fee schedule that they had proposed. So while we envision the measure ballot cost not changing because that is tied to the June effect, like it will happen in June, it would be priced out based on the current fee schedule, but come the November election for the directors, a new fee schedule will be in effect if passed. And so the quote that we received was based on an old. We are in the process of seeking an updated quote. But for now, this is the estimate that we have with the data that we have presently. Any questions so far about the very quick and high-level budget summary for now? We'll definitely dive into these numbers later. But yes, Lee.
Through the chair. Didn't hit my button hard enough, sorry. To add one other bit of information to the director election costs. Obviously it's an estimate, they're not actual costs yet. We will be billed at actual costs at the new rates that are about to go into effect. There are 4 seats that are up for election this year. This budget allocates money to cover 3. We typically don't have all 4 challenged. So just as a reminder, if a seat is uncontested, that director does not go on the ballot, and then we do not incur the election costs. There are fees much lower for the appointment. So we will know actual costs in early 2027 based on those fees. So I just wanted to let you know it's kind of a variable cost.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, moving on. So just wanted to also just refresh a quick review of our funds, just so that we know the incoming part. District 1 is a benefit assessment that the board approves to levy each fiscal year. It brings in approximately 4.2 million. Typically, it funds expenses such as salaries, operating costs, election costs. We also perform mitigation services for reimbursable. So we would pay for it first through District 1, and it gets reimbursed and put back into District 1. Also, any capital purchases and acquisitions can also be funded with District 1 funds. Measure T, the successor to Measure Q, it's a parcel tax, brings in about 8 million a year, each fiscal year. And similarly, it can fund expenses related to capital improvements, acquisitions, environmental education, stewardship, and then very popularly known as Urban Grant Program. It also funds that, as well as operating costs. And then for the reserve fund, it kind of segments into 3 separate sub funds, for lack of a better term. It's unrestricted fund, but we have the operational is kind of our rainy day fund. We have through board policy set aside 14 million for operational. And then per the guidance best practice for the Land Trust Alliance, they have recommended when we enrolled in the program that we set aside some stewardship and conservation and stewardship, like legal funds. And we have set aside an amount of 300,000. And the remaining balance that's left in our reserve is what we term as the capital reserve. We could use that for capital improvements, acquisitions, purposes. And then the last fund that we manage are the grants. These grants are monies that we receive upfront. And so we're holding on to the money, and we are basically drawing down from that cash as we deliver on the projects. But they are specifically for the project itself and not for just general operations. Any questions on the type of funds we have so far, how much we bring in, etc. Okay, so now having kind of that grounding for those funds, we've got 2 of those 4 rows that brings in recurring annual revenue. District 1, Measure T. Any unspent revenue that we receive kind of rolls over, and we that accumulated amount is what we deem carryover. And so this slide here summarizes the ending balance of our carryover as of June 30th, 2025 per the audit. Based on the approved budget for 25-26, I can project a ending balance as of June 30th of 2026 this year. Of that balance, there are monies that we have committed to certain programs, certain projects, certain grant programs. And so what's really available for the OSA to actually spend on our projects, our operations, would be that last column, the projected available carryover as of June 30th, 2026. And just to kind of give a little around more information about the committed funds. In District 1, that 2 million committed amount is the encumbered balance for the 20% funding program, as written into our District 1 5-year plan. The 1.7 million is the allocation that we've set aside over the years using Measure T money to put towards the grant program. Now, of that 1.7 that's set aside, it's being drawn down by our grantees. So there is an amount that's also been already awarded. That does not necessarily mean that that's the available amount to award future money as well. And then that same thing goes for Measure Q. That is the amount of the money that's left that we awarded and set aside for the Measure Q Urban Grant Program. The reserve, as mentioned in the previous slide, that 14.3 is a sum of a 14 million operational reserve, as well as a 300K of the conservation and stewardship reserve. And then the grants, the money that we received up front, again, that amount, because it's committed to each specific project that's awarded to. So that's actually, it wouldn't be available for us to use for like any project. It is for a specific project as per the grant agreement. So kind of with any questions on our carryover. So kind of if we're starting at the very beginning, we have our income, we got our savings. The proposed budget will recommend withdrawing some of these funds to use in the upcoming year to move forward additional capital projects and natural resources habitat restorations. And then so,
Christina,
Yes,
question on
yes.
the District 1 committed funds,
Mhm.
2 million. Is it safe to assume that we're actively trying to get those drawn down? That's also a set of funds that we're working at, and they're just pending projects.
Exactly. We send out a letter every year to the cities, to the city staff, to the elected officials, soliciting funds, reminding them of the money, that kind of thing. We have at least 2 that we're expecting, 2 applications that we're expecting to come in anytime. I feel like I've been saying that for a while, but they're in the pipeline, they're coming, and that will take up a good chunk of that 2 million. Some of the smaller amounts, I'll say we'll have probably future conversations about. It has an easement requirement that comes with the funds, and for cities that only have, $10,000, an easement is a high bar for a low dollar amount ask, and so there are probably conversations we need to have and figure out how best to approach that.
I was gonna ask if we have received any grant requests for the 20%. It sounds like no. I mean, we've been hearing on the fringes that they're coming, but no.
I can tell you, I've seen a draft version of at least one of them. I know they're really, really on their way. But it is a rolling application deadline, so they come in when the applicant is ready. And so it is the city of San Jose and the county that we're expecting applications from in the short term.
Okay, do they have to file by the end of this fiscal year or no?
No deadline. Yep.
No deadline, okay.
Okay. So actually, that's a good segue because besides covering the utilization of our carryover, we also leverage outside funding. And so I'm going to actually pass it over to Megan Drager. She's going to provide more information about the grants that we are putting recording in our budget.
Thank you and good evening. Yes, as she mentioned, we've been really successful bringing in outside funds, whether that's grants or other kinds of contributions. And I'll talk about these two numbers. 1.9 million is the outside funding that is in this year's budget that's before you that Justina went over, and I'll give you some more detail about that. The other number that of course is a lot bigger, 33.5 million, is on top of the 1.9. And that is some of the money that we're expecting in the next year. But for one reason or another, it's not in the budget, and I'll go into the details of that in just a moment. Next slide. Okay. So first for the 1.9, these are the projects that have grant funding assigned to them, and this is how much for each project and the source of the funding. I'll note again, as Justina mentioned, for each of these, the actual grant award is more than what they're spending in a year. Most of these grants are multi-year grants, 3 years, for example. And this is what the project manager plans to spend during just this one fiscal year. So this adds up to 1.9. You can see a variety of projects. As always with grants, they're primarily capital projects, but I will point out the Cal OES FEMA grant that is for cybersecurity and upgrading our technology. So it's a different kind of grant than what we usually get. We're excited about it. No questions about that? Next slide. Digging into the $33.5 million number, as Justina mentioned, and I'll say again, there are a couple of reasons why some things don't end up in our budget. The top example there, which is the agricultural conservation easement grant, that is 14.8 million. It is secured. We are under grant agreement. We are ready to go as the transaction, when the transaction happens. This does not go into our budget though, because the money literally doesn't come to us. It goes directly into escrow and does not hit our bank accounts. So the way we handle that is to not put it in the budget, but it is still secured. And I think we're highlighting this here partly just to give that whole picture of the things that might be outside the budget scope. The other numbers below are a little different. These are things that we anticipate getting, but they are not yet secured. So these are not things under grant agreement. Though we have various levels of certainty. Normally we don't report so much on this. We have a lot of applications out that we wouldn't put in here because they're competitive and we don't know the results until the awarding body gives us the news. These three are things that are a little bit different. So that's why I wanted to highlight them for you today. The first one, we have an existing county MOU. In fact, we have the funds in hand as part of the money that Justina was referring to earlier, some of the upfront money we get from grants. We have a project lined up that is exactly what this money is for, but technically we have to go to the Board of Supervisors and get an approval for the final amount before we commit it to the project. So we certainly anticipate approval. We have the funds, but because it's not fully secured, we don't have it in the budget. And yeah,
Is that from the park dedication or the park fees funds from the
I-
county?
honestly don't remember the source of the funds. It is from the county. It was $5 million given upfront that we executed back, I want to say 2019, but I can double check the source of the actual
Okay.
funds.
But it's already been partially executed,
Yes, we've used
So-
it on several projects.
so
many.
we're under contract for the full.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you.
I have a question on the previous slide, which is the 1.9 million outside. So what or where do the funds come from if come in over and or under on the project? Makes sense.
So meaning like if we have on here,
The 20,000, for instance, where do you gather the funds to cover the rest of the project? Or if you come in under on the project, what happens to those funds?
Good question. So if we come in where we need more, generally speaking, that would have to come out of OSA funds.
Okay.
But not always. These numbers again are what our project manager told us they expect to spend in a year. We have more than this available in the grants often. So depending on what the extra is, if it's something grant eligible and there's more money left in that grant, we can just spend more this year from the grant funds. It's at least possible. We may need to come back for approvals and change the project scope a little bit, but we can do that. In other cases, it might be the entire grant. And so if we went beyond that, we would have to fill that likely with OSA funds. Okay, and then the other kind of funds that add up to, that I was mentioning, like the County OMU was one example. I just want to call attention to the other two, which are Prop 4 funds. So these are things, as a reminder, the climate bond had a line item for the Coyote Valley Conservation Program, $25 million. And elsewhere in statute, the authority administers the Coyote Valley Conservation Program. So essentially, we control how that line item money is going to be spent. So that's what gives us a little more certainty than we normally would have with a grant application. We have been working with the State Coastal Conservancy for months now on what we're expecting this Coyote Valley Acquisitions grant, 14.5 million. We're anticipating that would happen at the September Coastal Conservancy Board meeting. That's when the award would happen. But again, not secured, not under grant agreement. And in that case, it's an acquisition, so it wouldn't be in the budget anyway because the money will go straight into escrow. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those other things because there is a lot more going on in grants outside of the 1.9.
Any questions or?
I,
Good.
just. Are we assuming we'll get the money this year, or are we gonna have to fight for it like we did last year?
The Prop 4 money.
Yeah.
Good question. We, of course, no guarantees. The legislature has to actually allocate it. It's in the bond, but it's up to the legislature each year to assign the amount of money that we're gonna get. We had encouraging news. The governor's original budget back in January had it in there, and likely it will stay in. The May revised will be out next week.
Okay.
And we'll see, but we anticipate that it's going to be in there. All the news we've heard from our folks we know in Sacramento has been positive. So we're anticipating that it will be in there and that it will come through the legislature. The timing, of course, is always a question. It may not be exactly available July 1, depending on when they pass the budget and that kind of thing, but we're very hopeful.
Yeah, no, I mean, the master plan is underway and your funds would be helpful not to be held up. Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, so now this is the breakdown of our estimated revenues and income that we anticipate receiving. So for between District 1 and Measure T, we're anticipating receiving about a little under 12.5 million. We also have land management revenue. And again, that is basically anticipated reimbursements for services that we render to other agencies for mitigation properties. And then the agricultural lease revenue. These are at least two. We have a few more extra smaller, but two major leases on properties for our agricultural land. So these are considered, I lumped them into the revenues because these are more certain. We have lease agreements, we have the mitigation agreements, as well as we know District 1 and Measure T are coming in. The next section is all our carryover. We anticipate withdrawing a little under 8.5 million of our carryover for this upcoming fiscal year. Measure Q would fund most of our capital improvement projects, master planning for CV Camp, North Coyote Valley, while Measure T would continue to fund our preserve maintenance and operations and some of our restoration projects. And unfortunately, our operating expenses continue to increase year over year, but our benefit assessment remains leveled. So we find ourselves having to use carryover from District 1 as well. And then historically, we've used our reserve to pay for measure ballot costs because Measure Q and Measure T does not allow for those type of expenses. And District 1 simply doesn't have the sufficient carryover to help pay for such a large balance. So very likely in fiscal year 26-27, we'll continue to use reserve to fund the election costs for the measure. And should the new measure pass, we can review the expenditure plan and adjust accordingly. But as it stands for now, as proposed, these would be the carryover amounts that we'll be utilizing. And finally, we have grants we've secured and anticipate to seek reimbursement for. There's interest income. Those are projected based on historical interest rates. And then we have grazing lease income, and that is also projected based on historical stocking reports received from our grazers. It could fluctuate, subject to the grazing capacity of our grazers, but that is around the historical average of the income. Any questions on the anticipated revenues and incomes? Yes.
Are we using about the same amount of carryover from this year from last year? Or is it a little bit more?
A little bit more. One major one is last year we did not use any reserve fund carryover because there were no election costs. So that one is right off the bat completely additional, about 3 million. And then as for T, we are using a little bit less because we've kind of prioritized our projects and we're trying to also draw down on Measure Q. So we're trying to withdraw a lot more of the Measure Q carryover. So that therefore it balances not needing that much Measure T as well. But it's around it's a little bit higher because District 1 also has a director elections that we budgeted for, and that was not in last year's budget or this current year's budget,
Yes.
which was proposed
one-
last year.
One before where we budgeted, and then we didn't have to spend it.
Yes, yeah. So in terms of the proposed budget, the carryover is higher than what we proposed last year for this current year's.
Yeah,
Budget.
and I'm trying to get an understanding because this is probably the third year in a row that we've actually reduced
Yes.
the budget. And so and we're using more carryover, then we're starting to see where that line is starting to
Yes.
cross.
Yeah.
Which I think, the public should be aware
Mhm.
of the fact that we are now hitting that unsweet spot. Let's put that.
Great question. Okay, next slide. This is the breakdown of the proposed budget itself, categorized by major expense category. Kind of going down each row. Payroll is our salaries for our staff. The benefits includes our agency staff's health benefits, medical, dental, vision. It includes the employer taxes as well as CalPERS and the unfunded liability for CalPERS as well. So that amount would fall into that line. Travel and expenses typically includes any mileage reimbursements for business trips, as well as allowance for business-related travel. And that includes either local travel going to Sacramento, so allow mileage and any type of parking and tolls, but also just as well as staff conferences and development associated with that, just for staff, board, committees. That includes with the travel expenses in there. The next major expense category, supplies and consumables, includes supplies in the office, out in the field. It includes postage, printing, safety equipment and supplies, uniforms for our field staff. Items that are more less of a shelf life or lifespan. It's just consumables. And then the next large category, typically it's one of our larger ones as well, consists of outside services. And within that, there are many different types of outside services. Services that are related to our agency and finances, like auditors, our investment advisor. We also have legal services, legal counsel. Then we also have staff development, workforce development, IT services. And then there's another section within that, it's communications related, any type of media, design and content services, translations. We've started investing in a lot of the translation services. And then resource management services, any type of consultants and subject matter experts for site monitoring, habitat restorations, hazmat type of services, disposal as well. Planning services like CEQA, long-range planning, as well as design and engineering for our projects. So I would consider that the planning services is a suite of services that are done pre-construction. And then finally, acquisition and capital improvement related like surveys and the actual construction cost itself. The next bucket is the other services and expenses. Typically, that includes our agency's business insurance, any type of fees, such as bank fees, permit fees, closing fees for escrow. It also includes our program expenses for our environmental education and volunteer program, and type of recruitment costs, fees including the 1% that the assessor's office charges us for collecting our assessments and parcel tax, as well as the election cost is in that line item as well. Hence why it's quite high, much higher compared to last year. So inside that are the election costs. Next bucket is the equipment and maintenance. This actually has to do with actually the procurement of the actual equipment as well as the maintenance of the fleet that we have. As well as not just vehicles, field equipment, but also our computer equipment for inside the office for all staff to use. And facilities and utilities mostly involves with janitorial, landscaping, alarm services, as well as utilities like our cellular, our mobile services, our radio, sorry, not walkie-talkie, a radio. And then gas, garbage. Most of the expenses are related to 33 Las Colinas, but there are some utilities that are for our properties. We do have PG&E energy electrical bills for our properties. And then some well, electric and gas is that in that. And then the next category is memberships and sponsorships. There are memberships as an agency as a whole, such as like us being part of California Special Districts Association, the fees associated with that, as well as for individual staff members, such as, for example, myself, continued education, staying up to date for GASB rule. So I would have a membership with our government finance officers association, for example. So that would be the line item for that. We also have sponsorships in which we work with other agencies to kind of bring together events and policies to kind of work together and move forward some projects. The second to the last line is the fee title and easement costs of the actual acquisition itself. So it's a very short, and for this year, we do not have anything budgeted in our 26-27 budget. And that's because one is we have those grants that are directly being deposited into escrow. So it's not showing up. That doesn't necessarily mean there's no acquisitions in the pipeline. So again, it's just more of there's no acquisitions that are using our money. And then as well as we tend to budget for any acquisitions that have more certainty. And at this point in time, the ones that are more certain to happen are grant funded. And then the last line, yes.
I
Yes.
just wanted to underscore that with these two acquisitions we're planning in the next year, it's more than $30 million and no OSA funds going into the acquisitions themselves. So because it's entirely outside funded. The zero there, I don't know if I
Yes.
fully
Yeah.
explain the excitement.
And then the last line, that is our grants allocation line. That includes any type of allocation amount for the 20% funding program as well as the urban grant program. Specifically, this 100,000 is the allocation for the urban grant program that we're proposing for next fiscal year.
Is that what came out of the meeting at School of Arts and Culture? When we increased the grant amount or was?
Well, there's a slide for this in a
Mhm.
moment, but so it's
Okay.
good to, because it's confusing. This is the allocation that the board approves every year that just goes into the pot. It's
Just
not
for- okay.
connected to the
Mhm.
solicitation. Yeah, yeah,
And we'll go into, we have one slide dedicated to the process. But this one is, purely just the allocation set aside to put into the pot.
Justina, now that you're going through the budget,
Mhm.
expenses and revenue, in our packet, the exhibit A actually ends it at 15 million for our revenue. And it does, and I'm just assuming that's because it doesn't show the carryover amounts that is listed.
Yes,
there.
that is correct.
So I wonder in this instance, because the carryover adds to us balancing out at
Mhm,
24
mhm.
million versus our expenses,
Mhm.
is it possible for us to also demonstrate that in our
Sure.
packet?
Yes, of course. Okay, thank you for that feedback. I'll add that. Okay. Any other specific questions about the budget, the proposed budget? So this shakes out to approximately 23.9 million that we are proposing for fiscal year 26-27. And so this one here is more of a different view of the breakdown. So we had the budget broken down by major expense categories. This one here shows our salaries and benefits, as well as our non-discretionary, our project expenses, the election costs, operating expenses, and then the capital expenditures. So kind of how it shakes out into the different components of the budget. Any questions? Yeah.
Line item.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Legal expenses.
Yes.
So I see that your 6433 legal counsel general is where you put in the huge chunk of
Mhm.
expense,
Mm-hmm.
but you have zero for litigation. Is that just assuming that the legal counsel will take that on if any future litigation happens?
So I don't want to assume that's for a specific type of litigation, but our anticipation, this is for our regular course of business. Should we have any litigation, it might be that we would come back to the board for an amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't plan ahead for a litigation in our budget at this time.
I will say that the election costs are almost 20% of the budget.
Yes,
Here, that is. Oof.
yes. And that was hence why we're going to be using a lot more carryover this year. It's just, but it's, yeah,
You don't have choice.
yes, there's no choice. It's a non-discretionary
Yeah.
cost.
Hearing that costs are gonna go up.
Yes, yeah. So yes, our budget of 23.9, almost 24, is mainly driven by the election costs, increasing it by a lot.
And just for clarification, Measure D, election costs, will be in this budget here
Yes.
because of when it hits, when you're gonna get billed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the board has approved to be placed on June, but typically, going off a pattern of when we have the general election in November, I get the invoice like in January. So it would hit squarely into the next fiscal year, even though it's happening in this fiscal year.
I have another line item.
Yes, of course.
On the payroll for
Mhm.
staff,
Mhm.
is that anticipating any potentially new?
Oh,
Allow Justina to move to the next slide.
would that be okay? I will, okay. But yes, I would actually, after this kind of chart thing showing that 43%, I was going to then hand it over to Elizabeth Loretto, our administrative operations manager, to talk about salaries and benefits.
And everything that makes us that 43%. I will stick with my talking points, but I promise I will answer the question. If I try to jump around, I'll lose my place and forget to tell you something, I'm sure. So one of the first, as Justina mentioned, it's 43% is our salaries and benefits of total planned expenditures. One of the main factors that contributes to that is our cost of living adjustment that we recommend each year applied to wages. Historically, we have recommended cost of living adjustments based on the March report for the Consumer Price Index of the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose region for the year that ends in February. So every other month, the federal agencies are releasing updated CPIs. And so based on that data, the CPI that was available is 2.5%. So that's what we are recommending and what you see reflected in the expenditures in the budget. We do like to make sure we're staying on par with our peers. It's part of how we keep our pay plan competitive. So just a little share out is that in the 2026 year, some happening at our same fiscal year intervals, some happening at slightly different times. East Bay Regional Parks, Mid-Penn, and Santa Clara County Parks is who we compare to. All three of them do have union represented employees, and so they have pre-negotiated cost of living adjustments, but East Bay and Mid-Penn are both at 3%, and Santa Clara County Parks is actually at 3.5%. So we're a little lower than them this year, but the other thing we always like to look at is kind of how does this methodology work out for us in average. So we've been utilizing this COLA approach since for the last 11 budget years. And our current average is 3.01%. So some years it might be a little higher than what we're seeing directly at our competitors, and some years like this year, a smidge lower. If we were to move forward with the 2.5% COLA, that average since implementing this model would actually decrease a little bit more to 2.75, but kind of ebbs and flows, and then that keeps us competitive with our comparators there. Any questions on the COLA in particular before I move on to, okay. So staffing. It's kind of an interesting year. We are not looking to add any new permanent positions. So we always are trying to balance that fiscal responsibility with mission delivery and looking at what our priority projects and needs are. We are looking to create a brand new seasonal employment opportunity for a natural resources technician. That is an area that needs a little more staffing, but not necessarily all year long. So somebody who would join that team for about a 6-month period to help us do some of the seasonal work there. And in previous years, we've budgeted for 4 paid internships, and this year we're only budgeting for 3 to host. So the net impact of those 2 positions is actually pretty flat. But we're looking to have 3 internships in the areas of communications, policy, and long-range planning, supporting the CB Camp project. And then there are 2 positions recommended for promotion or reclassification. The first is an open space technician. Tech 1 is being recommended to be promoted to open space tech 2, recognizing their professional growth, but also allowing the team to have another kind of more experienced leader out in the field who can lead some of the projects they do. And our grant program coordinator is being recommended to be promoting to the new classification of external funding specialist, which allows deeper engagement with all of the great external funding work that Megan's given you a lot of insight into tonight, and taking more leadership on some of those strategies for grant opportunities. So not new headcount, but a little bit of growth and continuing opportunities for folks through seasonal and internships. Yes.
Can you say again how many seasonal you are anticipating? I
Well,
missed that.
So every year we host 4 seasonal open space aids in the field operations department. So we've done that consistently for at least 5 or 6 years now. We took a little break at one point before COVID, but we've been doing that very consistently. And we're looking to, in addition to that, have 1 seasonal natural resources technician.
Thank you.
Of course. But so when people ask me how many employees does the Open Space Authority have, I'm like, that depends. Do you want to know permanent full-time? Do you want seasonals? So we're looking at 65 permanent year-over-year committed positions. So that takes we don't count the seasonals in that number because the seasonal positions are our most discretionary positions, kind of from an operational perspective, so. That's what that number is reflecting. And then I do just want to highlight that on our org chart, there are 3 permanent positions that are being left vacant to kind of with that strategic objective of balancing our budget and keeping things contained. The first being our deputy clerk of the board, one of a senior open space planner, and an open space technician 2 position. And those 3 we've been holding vacant. This will be our 3rd fiscal year now that we're holding those vacant. And that's what I had for you on staffing. Are there any questions or anything I didn't answer for you, Director Dominguez? You're curious. I love that you guys are curious about our folks.
So the one thing I did want to mention that I've always heard of is that the salary, it's the benefits that this organization provides that really makes us a place where people want to work.
Correct. So yes, our benefits, which again, part of that 43% of total expenditures, we pay 100% of the premiums for employee and all dependents for medical, dental, and vision. And we have a contract agreement with the county of Santa Clara. So we offer their benefits at their buying power and their bargained value. So they're also very good benefits in terms of the out-of-pocket costs for employees and things like that. So yes, oftentimes that is, and the CalPERS pension and paid time, a very robust paid time off, which you all helped us increase just this last fall with some new holidays and vacation time. So yes, our salaries, if you just are looking at hourly rates, we do trend lower than many of the competitors in the South Bay directly, but just also in the world of parks and open space and other government agencies. But our benefits level us up in a very competitive way. And I think it contributes greatly to our retention for that perspective too.
I agree. But to clarify,
Yeah.
3 vacant positions.
Yes.
That you're putting on hold is because you're keeping a conservative budget again for this year.
Yes, these are positions that we would love to have. I'll take the deputy clerk because it's the easiest one to talk about. You all have gotten to know Ivy greatly. But Ivy is our office and facilities coordinator, and she
Right.
helps Caroline where she can with like meeting night activities. But there are things we would love to be able to do in terms of records management or process improvement and things like that in the governance and clerk functions that we just have to do on a slower pace because it's Caroline who's our one full-time employee dedicated to those. So we're just choosing to maybe slow roll some of those routine things to save the money. So yes.
But is that necessarily the cut that needs to be made, or could there be expenses in other areas that can be adjusted for roles that are essentially needed and could help with internal processes?
I have to admit, like, I mean, yes, I'm sure there are other trade-offs that could be made. This is with the balancing the value of delivering our strategic objectives and delivering our mission and the things in the land and our daily operations with the field and all of that. Those just have kind of always been prioritized a little higher in that way. So
I'm just curious because it's a position that's been on hold for almost 3 years.
All
So
three
there's
of those,
obviously
yeah.
still a need for it if you're on year 3,
yeah,
hoping that one day you get it.
yeah.
But I understand.
Yeah, all 3 of those positions were identified in the same time. The first year that we decided that we took a very strategic look at our staffing and then we just kind of held them there. And like this year, we are promoting somebody else to an open space Tech 2 position, but we're not, increasing the head count, and realistically, we would still love that other one too. So, all right. Yeah. I think if there's no other questions, I hand it back to Justina.
Thank you. Okay. So that one component, salaries and benefits, there are also other components within the budget. For the discretionary OpEx, operating expenses, besides the cost of our programmatic programs and costs, the agency also sets aside some allowances. I wanted to highlight that tonight. The agency emergency response allowance is an allocation of $50,000 that we're setting aside in an event of an emergency because we don't know if we can count on FEMA and any type of emergency funds. We want to be responsible and prepare our own funds. And so our expectations is putting it aside doesn't necessarily mean that we need to use it, but should we ever need to use it, we could seek assistant general manager approval to use it across the agency. So agnostic of the department, pending board approval for that allowance. The next allocation, that is we're keeping it at $100,000 for the urban grant program. There's another slide that, again, I'll go into deeper of what that number means and how it flows into solicitation, disbursement. But that one is the number that we're keeping static. And then the last one, the Measure T administrative allowance, keeping that same amount as the current fiscal year, $2 million. The term administrative allowance, as written in the Measure T expenditure plan, the plan itself allows us to use some of the revenues generated by the measure for the administrative expenses as the board determines as reasonable and necessary, and you would approve it through the budget process. The Measure T's allowance considers like non-project expenses to be administrative. And so just because it's not directly tied to a project, Measure T considers that as administrative. However, there are non-project expenses with strong direct ties to move projects forward, and they're integral to our agency's work. But they fall within that definition of administrative. For example, GIS, program management expenses, communications about our projects, about safety on our preserve, the urban grant program administration of reviewing the grants, putting together grant agreements, processing the disbursements, outside funding, research and grant writing, strategic preserve planning overall as an agency, and just general field supplies and consumables that might not be directly tied to being used at a preserve, but in general for the agency to be used out in the field. So those non-project expenses that support the number of projects that we have, the programs throughout, they're kind of best demonstrated by this donut chart here. So over the years, Measure Q and Measure T's true kind of administrative costs, those are more tied to expenses associated with staff time, a portion of staff time publishing committee packets, doing the Measure T audit, Measure Q and Measure T audit, any type of the engineering services for the parcel tax, as well as writing the status report. So my staff time, compiling that data together. They account for the smallest portion of MQ and MT portion at 3%, what we deemed the administrative and governance part of it, putting the packets together, writing the status report. The rest of this admin allowance that Measure T is funding is really the cost of that critical support that every project needs, that program implementation support amount. And that's that grant seeking, that GIS work, and what field needs to kind of maintain and operate, but can't pinpoint to that specific preserve. So kind of that 2 million in a way is a combination of that program implementation support as well as the administration and governance expenses as well. So just kind of giving that overview and insight into why we asked for that allowance of 2 million, it actually is made up of paying for some admin, but that none, the other program implementation support expenses as well. Any questions regarding the allowances? Okay, so then now the Urban Grant Program. Okay, so in the budget, the 100,000 that the committee sees, what the board will see is actually the allocation, the money that we're setting aside into kind of like the piggy bank, the pot. And then we kind of let that accumulate. It might take about several years to kind of build up a good, chunk of change. And then we would then go to the board with that balance of what's available to award. The board would also then decide, well, of that amount, how much would we like to put into that solicitation? Right. And then from there, the final award at a board meeting. And then after that, it kind of goes into like maintenance mode. It's basically over the years as the grantees work on their project, draw down, we would make these disbursements over the fiscal year. Those disbursements show up in the audit of how much we actually pay out to our grantees. So it would show up as our actuals on our profit and loss statement as expenses because those are the monies coming out. So those are kind of like the three major stages of different numbers that kind of pop up. Hopefully I did it justice by explaining it, but are there any questions I could further clarify in terms of what that $100,000 actually means and where it stands? Okay. Awesome. And then with that, I might actually hand it over to Lee with a little look ahead of what the committee can expect.
Great, thanks, Justina. Yeah, so where are we going next? Well, as you've heard from Megan, staff has lined up a really generous amount of outside funding already, but we'll continue to look for ways to take advantage of additional funding resources. The staff, which just so happens to be this team of 4 presenting tonight, also working on some financial forecasting scenarios. We'll be working with the rest of MST and our executive leadership team to craft some scenarios to bring forward to the board so that you can set some fiscal goals and aid in some future financial or strategic financial decisions. And should the citizen-led initiative be successful in June, staff would certainly welcome an invitation from the board to revisit you early in the new fiscal year, to perhaps request a budget amendment to advance some projects that we might be able to expedite or, make larger investments in sooner rather than later. And then the very next step would be to bring this proposed budget to the board on Thursday, June 11, for full board consideration and hopefully approval. Yeah.
So in anticipation that everything goes well on June 2nd, would that request to use a special addendum be done at the June 11th meeting, or would you want to do it in the next fiscal year?
We of course are open to whatever your board would like to direct. If the invitation from the board came at the June 11th meeting requesting staff to come back and let us know what you're looking for, we would need a little time to put things together. But if the board directs staff to come back, we would, as I said, we'll
I'm trying to be logical here, right?
Yes, and we're trying not to be presumptuous, but
Right,
but yes.
I would think by that meeting, we would know, right?
We should know, yeah.
I have a question around the urban grant program and just remind me again, the process of allocating the 100K. That was decided when, and
Sure.
when can that decision be changed? Like, what's the process around that?
Yeah.
So the allocation would be at the board budget hearing. So what the board would determine to allocate to. So it would be during the budget process, the
So
budget.
deci- Change the 100K and increase it can happen on June 11th, is what you're saying?
Or in a potential budget.
Amendment, yes.
So
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, like we were just referencing.
clarification.
exactly, if that is one of the things the board would like to increase, that could be done either that meeting or a meeting soon thereafter.
Okay.
But is there the expectation that if a board decision is made to increase that, there will be conversation on where that money comes from?
Yes. Because what happens is we get 8 million from Measure T.
Yeah.
And then whatever we allocate to the urban grant program, the remainder is for our own projects. So it's kind of like, it's a zero-sum game of where you're taking it from.
And if I could also add, the other consideration is how, assuming we're successful in June, how quickly that revenue will come. And what number are you would the board be thinking about? And just having all of that information so that you could select a number that you feel confident about.
And. Well, then I have to process this sentence in my head.
Justina, I had questions about,
Yes.
6480.
Yep.
Because that's where a large bucket of money is going in, and they were just totals, and I was hoping to get some information
Yes.
about which projects
Yep.
those were funding.
And I have them at the ready.
Oh,
but- Should I finish that or I don't know if we want to, no worries. Do we want to finish Director Dominguez's thought as it relates to whatever Lee, what might have been talking about?
If you could just remind me how much is left right now.
Yes.
after Last round. No, I just couldn't put the numbers together.
Okay, yes. Okay.
30.
Okay, yes, I also have that. So for Measure Q, there is zero balance available to award. We've already awarded everything from there. There is money left in the pot is because it's already been awarded and it's waiting. Yeah, it's already been awarded out. We're just basically waiting for grantees to kind of just draw down from that. For Measure T, the balance as of April 30th is 552,658 and 78 cents. So 552,658.78.
And that 552 was then allocated to the recent
Oh.
grantees.
No.
Okay, no, so that's just moving forward, we have
Yes.
552, okay,
Yes.
so. any
So-
Potential grant.
Yes.
Process we have, it'll go to that.
So then for hypothetical, should the board approve the $100,000 allocation for fiscal year 26-27, by the end, like as in within that year, it would increase that to 652,000.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
in cents, yeah. Okay, so that one. And then 6480. So 6480 is a suite of planning services. It includes general planning, GIS mapping services, long-range planning, CEQA, environmental site assessments, and as well as design and engineering for capital improvement projects. I don't have, so my projects don't exactly all add up to exactly to the penny. I pulled big, large numbers. General planning, there is 3 projects taking up about $52,000. The Pajaro River and Yagas Creek Confluence Project, the Bailey Ponds Stepping Stone Project, as well as the Native Nursery Project. The remaining 100K is more of an allowance just for subject matter experts, just to have to plan at the ready for any type of land use and policy.
Was that item 6484?
Sorry, 6481.
81.
Yeah, and 80, yeah. And then 6482, 50K of the 150 is for the acquisition strategic plan. So the thing is with these general ledger accounts, they are a combination of some project expenses as well as some programmatic expenses as well. So then some departments, like for conservation planning, our Conservation and Strategic Partnerships Department also has a budget set aside for at the ready to kind of consult with subject matter experts for conservation and policy land use type of services. And then for 6483 GIS and mapping services, of the 118,000, 100 of it is associated to the trail map redesign project that's on the work plan. So that's a big one. The remainder, the other two are more of just for, again, programmatic, just mapping services. 6484 long range planning, that whole amount is CV camp. Yeah, okay. And then 6485 CEQA, that is a combination, that 700K, 500-ish is about this, is for CV camp. There's another 60 for fuels management.
Okay.
And then 6486 environmental site assessments, about 90,000, but 50,000 of it is associated with our capital improvement project for Cardi Valley North Meadow, the accessibility project. The remainder is just a allowance for any type of site assessments for acquisitions. So unknown, but if an opportunity pops up, we have
Might
money.
fit.
Yes, yes. 6487 design, about 530K, 240 of it, so about half is about for CV camp, another 200 for Bailey Ponds, and the Laguna Stepping Stone projects, two of those. And then a little smidge, sorry, I forgot to write down the amount, but is for the Rancho Cañada de Oro, the regional trail planning project. But those four make up about the 530. 6488 engineering services, that 25K is for the Cuddy Valley North Meadow accessibility project. And then that should make up the suite of 6480.
Oh, 6498 was the other one I was interested
Mhm.
in, construction.
Yes. So about that $900,000,
Mhm.
that is between Rancho Cañada de Oro Regional Trail, $50,000, but that's fully grant funded right there. And then the other one is the Coyote Valley North Meadow Accessibility Project. That one is about 200 funded by Measure Q and about 650,000 funded by grant fund.
So, I'm sorry, so if 200 is from,
Measure Q,
yeah, out of the 910, right? 200,
200 and 654 for from grant fund. So that is about
so
850.
that number includes the grant?
Yes.
Oh. okay,
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing why, oh, kind of, sorry, stepping back a little, why we put our grant, what we anticipate to spend on our awarded secured grants is in our budget is because we actually have to pay it first. So any type of money that we have to spend, it has to be in our budget, and then we would get reimbursed afterwards. These are based on reimbursement basis. They did not give us the money up front. But in terms of for the accounting, there is going to be the grant income on top, but the grant expenses at the end, it'll wash out once it kind of,
Sure.
so it's a
once the
time, yeah.
money comes
Mhm.
in.
But we have to budget for the expense itself first too.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's why I get confused, right?
Yes. So yes, so that 900 isn't all just our money. It includes some grants. Yes.
Thank you. And these are just projects. I get it.
Yeah. For the construction, it mainly would be project. These numbers do shake out exactly to what is that 910,750.
Okay.
Yes. There's no programmatic costs associated with construction. Mhm.
Explanation.
Yes.
It's a lot clearer and
Yes.
heavier.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other line items to, yeah, of course.
Not specific to any line item, but I
Oh.
guess very similar to you. I'm trying to get an understanding of the cost associated with just the operations of the organization and what, like, where you could just kind of pinpoint that on the sheet, on the financial sheet.
Oh.
One. And I know it's probably everywhere, but I think
Yes.
it would allow me an understanding of if nothing changes and we move forward. Like the sustainability of that
Mhm.
cost this much is what I need to know. And then the second one is where did you see the biggest variance percentage change in any of your expenses from your 2025 ending to this budget, this expense budget now?
Got it. So this pie chart, I would say the non-discretionary operating expenses are kind of like our recurring,
7%.
yeah. And then I would also recommend adding the department operating expenses. So the programmatic work, like for example, in one of those listed items, the environmental site assessment, there is a allowance for site assessments for acquisitions, but that's not non-discretionary. We can make the choice not to move forward with that site assessment. Like, so, but it's an operating expense for the department in order to kind of continue their programmatic work. So then to kind of continue our work, it's really the two added together. Yes, plus the salaries, non-discretionary operating expenses, plus departmental operating expenses would be kind of the base operating expense.
So if I'm looking at your line item, that predominantly falls under Measure T.
Not necessarily.
Okay,
Um,
with, I guess, an exception of some Measure Q funding, I guess.
Measure Q in the Excel sheet, exhibit A, Measure Q mainly funds capital improvement projects, the hard costs for, it does not pay for any staff time associated with executing those capital improvement projects, but it would include just the hard costs. And then Measure T funds some salaries associated with the Measure T eligible projects and programs, plus a lot of field operating expenses, field and natural resources, actually. And then the other departments are more District 1. Administrative operations, communications and media, those would most likely be funded by District 1. Because the type of expenses like our financial advisor or our audit is not eligible for Measure T funding. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
makes sense. I guess there's different percentages of a person's time that's
Yes.
allocated to
Projects and then,
different
yes,
of these revenue streams.
Yep.
That's what makes it so complicated.
yes.
Okay, I'll get there someday.
And to give yourself credit, that Excel sheet doesn't quite break out that picture. What the whole board will get is the budget report, and there are many different tables that slice and dice the expenses to kind of give you that view. What is operating versus project versus capital investments? Then there's by department by fund. There's, yeah.
Oh, that's great. 'Cause
Yeah.
They were testing us, see? Today, we were.
Yes.
And just see, when do you anticipate spending down all of Measure Q?
Oh.
That would be like so much easier to understand if there was one left. Well, there, okay, maybe one.
Oh,
True, but,
okay.
but.
Cycle continue.
He was gone, yeah.
So Q currently the agency is using to fund acquisitions, which again ebbs and flows. It's not, and then the capital improvement projects, we're working on it. CVAL's gonna draw down a few. The only way, not to kind of toot our own horn, it's very hard for me to draw down MQ when they keep bringing in grants. So we would basically project the projects and think, oh, we're gonna spend this much in the budget. And then we bring in grants, so then it doesn't really quite use MQ funds as anticipated. So long story short is I don't have an answer of when when we will be able to draw down. Yeah.
Good problem.
Yeah.
And what Justina didn't say explicitly is that we do look very hard to prioritize.
Yes,
Utilizing
we
those
can,
funds
yeah.
where we can,
Yeah.
absolutely. Even, as part of our year-end process, there's always kind of some re-scrutiny to make sure we've coded the right projects and the right expenses that we can. Because we realize
mhm.
that, yeah, it'd be great to finish expending that funding.
Trust me, no one is more motivated than me to draw down Measure Q. But yeah, my philosophy is always use someone else's money first. And then we'll do Measure Q, Measure T, and then District 1 in reserve. That's the kind of like the hierarchy of how we're charging our expenses.
And then just going back to the last question I had, the biggest variance
Oh, sorry.
percentage change on this expense sheet.
I don't have the exact variances. I can get back to you on that one.
Just
um,
to see that being a board
but-
question.
Yes, but and I will get that. I will make sure I'm prepared with that at the board public hearing. The biggest one definitely is the other services. That one I know hands down. The other service, because of the election costs, is the biggest variance. Outside services also dropped a little bit because last year we had some construction. This year it's only Coyote Valley is our major one. I think the previous years we'd had Mino Yakima as well as the Yagas Creek bridge trip. Yeah. And so those were upticks of construction, and this one here, it's we lowered. The rest I have to double check, but I'll have that prepared. Yeah. Mhm.
Do we have any questions online, Carolyn?
There are none.
With that, I'd like to call this meeting over at 6:51. Thank you.